Call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, the reason that members on this side will be voting no confidence in this budget is for a number of reasons. As I said in previous speeches, the day Mark Byers, a multi-millionaire, the biggest crook in blue chip, earning over $1 million a year, the day he got his 75 hours community service, John Key gave him $1,000 a week tax cut. On the same day, every person, and another reason why we believe there is no confidence in this, is because on the same day, a person on the average wage got a 30% real terms, it was 30% in real terms worse off after they got their tax cut, after it was negated by GST, after it was negated by the big elephant in the room, which is 5.9% inflation. And I say to Mr Peachy, the other reason why we're voting no confidence in this, and he might want to reflect on it, is because 56% of his electorate in Tamaki that he is so proud of, presumably the 56% he doesn't want to represent, earn $40,000 or less, and are therefore, thanks to him and his vote of confidence, $30 to $50 per week worse off. But his mates on the other side of the Tamaki electorate, on $1 million a year and more, get $1,000 a week. And that man over there talked about the vindictiveness, was the term he used, of tax increases. Well, I say to Mr Peachy, if it is vindictive to raise revenue from the people to fund health expenditure, to fund education expenditure, to fund superannuation expenditure, then we stand on this side guilty as charged. Absolutely guilty as charged. That member over there then talked about choices. Well, I say to Mr Peachy, why doesn't he talk to the 56% of his electorate who are $30 a week worse off as a result of his confidence vote, and ask them, do they have a choice to pay the increase in the power bill? Do they have a choice to pay the increase in the rates bill, thanks to GST and inflation? Do they have a choice, the poorest in our community and the superannuitants on fixed incomes have a choice to pay the increase in food prices? Oh no, where's Mr Peachy now? He's representing the old 40% or 44% of his electorate, which are very well off. Well, it isn't even that much, actually, if you look at the figures. Sir, this budget is a swindle. This budget is a swindle. This budget, sir, or remember on budget night, we had these members get up and talk about 80% budget approval. Oh, yes, did they crow. And we said to them in speech after speech that the people will take a little time to unpick it, to unravel it, to undo the stitching as the hem of this budget is released. And what did we have last night? Well, the people delivered their verdict. Not 80%, 37% of the people said that only 37% of the people said they feel that they will be better off. The rest said they wouldn't. And when you pile on the GST, and that member who talked about, or was it Pansy Wong, that the Prime Minister in going to some footy match is standing beside the younger generation, well, how does that stack up in credibility with the massive cuts to ECE, which are piled on the cost that parents will pay, plus the GST, plus the 5.9% inflation? How is that standing beside the younger generation if that's what it takes to go to a footy match? And what was the Prime Minister's response in the Dominion Post to this? To only 37% of people are going to feel better off, they say. The rest feel worse off. No, they said, don't sweat it. Don't sweat it, was his response, sir. Don't sweat it. Don't sweat the 2.5% GST rise. Don't sweat the 5.9% inflation. Don't sweat the ECE cuts, which equate to $25, an increase in fee of $25 per child per week on top of what mum and dad Kiwis have got to pay. Don't sweat it, he says. And then he says he stands by New Zealanders and he stands by young people. Well, I say to Mr Peachy, go and talk to the 56% of your electorate, sir, that are worse off thanks to that member's vote of confidence. Because if 37% of people say they feel worse off, you're going to ask, they're going to feel better off, you've got to ask what the others say, sir. And that is why we do not have confidence, sir, in this budget. And the Prime Minister's response is, don't sweat it. The Prime Minister's response is, don't sweat it. The Prime Minister's own budget figures show that after he's done all the cash, after he's borrowed $240 a week for 3 years, where the finance costs don't drop down, don't start decreasing till 2021, his own figures show that the additional GDP growth cumulatively is 0.9% over 7 years. Well, isn't that a step change? Isn't that closing the gap with Australia? Isn't that aspirational for New Zealanders? Isn't that ambitious? 0.9% cumulatively over 7 years. Well, that's great, isn't it? Stack that up against the 70-odd people who are working on a cycleway. And I say this to Mr Peachy, who questions why we would vote against this piece of legislation. Well, I say this to him, because it's unfair. It's unfair when a third of the tax cuts go to the top 5% and 15% goes to the top 1%. When Mark Byers, the crook from Blue Chip, gets $1,000 a week thanks to Morris Williamson and his mates, because he earns over $1 million, and people on the average wage are $30 to $50 a week worse off. You tell me, Mr Speaker, whether that is a definition of fairness. We say, and then we get the speech from that member, that it is vindictive to raise revenue for things like social services, like superannuation. He says, that member says, sir, well, we should be encouraging savings. Well, I agree with him. The question is, why did he kick the guts out of KiwiSaver? Why did he kick the guts out of KiwiSaver when part of KiwiSaver was set up for the very sentiments that that member expressed to give young people especially a start on their first home? Oh, hang on, the vessel's empty. It's echoing over there. The old dust mite in the seat hasn't said anything. Oh no, perhaps because he doesn't want, sir, the old dust mite to talk about the 56% of his electorate that will be worse off thanks to his vote of confidence, because 56% of his electorate, sir, earn 40 grand or less. So then we go to KiwiBank, my colleague says, oh yeah, so Mr English has spent all the cash, he's borrowed $240 a week, borrowed up to the hill, the credit card's maxed out, and then we come to the doozy that sort of slipped out the other side, which was we'll flog the family silver. And he's got an interesting economic equation. He says mums and dads can buy KiwiBank. Forgets, of course, that mums and dads, everyone in this chamber, every member of the gallery, every member of this nation already owns that asset now, of course. So Mr English, in his own privileged, pompous way, is going to allow mums and dads to spend their own money again to buy again what they already own. And then the interesting thing is you've got to ask which mums and dads will be able to afford to buy this asset for a second time. Well, I would wager very few. And if they did get a chance to get a slice of it, of course the international institutions would offer them something called a very nice price for it, and away it would go back overseas into overseas ownership. But that one slipped out. And the other problem with flogging KiwiBank, of course, is that you can only sell it once. And the question for the government is, if you're going to flog, if the thesis is that an asset that took, I think, about $80 million, an asset that took about $80 million and returned a value in today's terms of around $800 million, if that's good enough to sell a valuable, profitable asset, then what do you do on the other side of the equation? Is Kiwi Rail, you're going to flog that? It's because Kiwi Rail's not performing the way we would want it to be. And I say to Morris Williamson, who's sort of barking over there like some sort of lame dog, I say, is he in favour of this? Is he in favour? Will he stand up to his constituents, tell him to call a public meeting, and let's have a debate on KiwiSaver. And let's see if we can get a percentage of people who agree with flogging that off. Oh yes, the member said, well, we flogged assets off in the 80s. That's true. That's true. And then we learnt. The problem is that party did in the 90s, and that party has not learnt today. And it slipped out of Bill English's mouth, although he said it a little bit before the election. And what he's now doing is prepping these assets for sale. So we have in this budget a dishonest budget, one that has used all the cash, one that is borrowed for the next generation, and now the next step is let's flog off some successful assets. Well, I say Kiwis will object to that. I say Kiwis, judging by what is reflected in last night's poll on the 37%, have taken a few days, logically, coolly, in a common sense way, to start unravelling this budget from stem to stern. And they've finally worked out that all the spin that they're going to be better off is not true, and it simply stacks up on this equation again. How is it fair a person earning $1 million a year gets $1,000 a week, and someone on the average wage is $30 a week worse off. So that is not fair. That is a swindle. That is a dishonest budget.
I'm going to advise the